Hey, Lance Hahn.
Hey, Brett Starr.
How you doing? I'm Brett Starr. He's Lance Hahn. We're from the Starr Conspiracy, and we're talking about the 4-day work week today, or what we call at the Starr Conspiracy, the 3-day weekend.
Yeah. Let's get some light on me. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Looking good. Which that distinction has always been very important for me, but we can talk about that in a little bit. Get us started, Lance. What's going on?
Yeah. So basically at last summer, I think June, the UK, about 60 companies from the UK decided to participate in a trial of the 4-day week. And basically what they said is we would pay 100% of your pay to work 80% of the time and try to get as close to 100% of the outcomes as you could over those 4 days. It was run by Boston College, Oxford, Cambridge, a few places you've probably heard of. And so it was going to run for 6 months. And basically they released a report this week about just how that went. And it went very good. So I've got some stats here from that.
The results are in.
The results are in.
Let's hear them.
So basically what folks said is the number of staff leaving fell by 57% over the trial period. 92% of organizations are continuing with the 4-day week. That's probably the biggest headline coming out of that. 90% of employees say they definitely want to continue on a 4-day week. 71% of employees, I wonder who the other 10% are. I'm just like, I don't like this.
Terrible home lives.
Yeah. Like, this
Please
is
get me work.
Can I get another job? 71% of employees had reduced levels of burnout by the end of the trial. 60% found an increased ability to combine paid work with care responsibilities. A big thing, obviously, with like 1 million plus women missing from the workforce in the United States. One of the big challenges there. 15% of people said no amount of pay could get them to go back to a 5-day work week. So lots of good feedback. Something we've known about for a long time. Obviously here, we kind of experimented with it early. We did it, I think, initially every other week was a 4-day week. And now for 2.5 years?
2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5 years. We've been doing it for full time.
Yeah. So those are amazing results. I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
You're probably not either, Lance. No amount of money could get me to go back to a 5-day work week. But I will say this. So the 4-day work week works, but you can't just go to a 4-day work week. And I think this is the part that requires, a lot of preparation and thought. And hey, you are today, listeners, you're in the unique position of talking to two people who have been part of an experiment to create a 3-day weekend. We call it a 3-day weekend. We'll talk about that why for 2.5 years. And we can tell you how to do it. And we can tell you all the things that you're not expecting and how to make room for it. And all that stuff. So, let's go for it. I mean, first of all, let's just talk about I call it a 3-day weekend. This was passed by proposition. So it was put to a vote to the company in the early days of the pandemic, and it passed, like 98%, maybe 100%. I don't know. And so we implemented a 3-day weekend, and I called it a 3-day weekend because I wanted to make sure that people understood that Friday was not some kind of in-between day that all of the work that didn't get done floated into. It was not a transitional day. It was just like a Saturday or Sunday. And I remember writing the memo, and I was like, you're going to have a lot of questions like, can I do this on Friday? Can I do that on Friday? Can I reach out to someone? Can I schedule a meeting? Can I blah, blah, blah? And my point was, well, just ask yourself if you could do those things on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah. And, sometimes in a professional services context, in a, an experience agency like ours, sometimes you work on the weekends.
That's right.
And it happens every now and then, cool. It's when it starts to become habit or an expectation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, I think it's been really incredible. But I would highlight kind of multiple things that have to go well and have to go right for it to work. But before we get there, what's been your experience, Lance? So when we went to the 3-day weekend, how did your situation change?
Well, I think I told you that if we're going to do it, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, once you sort of like experience this and you sort of plan your life around this, it changes your life completely. And so, you just have to make sure you're committed to it, because it's one thing to, and like I think we've seen a lot of companies. I've talked to a number of folks that wanted to experiment with it, which is great, especially if you couch it as that. Like, let's see what we can do. In the Pacific Northwest, a lot of companies did this over the summer because like it's just an unbeatable time to be out there and be not in the office. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been a good experience. I think you're right. I mean, I think the incidence of working on the weekends is exactly the same as it was before. I'm usually choosing to work on Fridays if I have to work a weekend day because my family's not here, my kids in school. It's a great time to do that, but it's not happening at like a higher frequency or anything like that. So to your point, yes, some days we work on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, but it was the same amount that we did there. And yeah, I mean, I think the challenging thing that we've seen, and I think the BBC had a great article on this that I actually shared in the newsletter this week. And I think some organizations really tried to figure this out, like how they were going to get this done, because part of the commitment there was we should be as close to full week productive as we can. I don't know if that's realistic, but trying to sort of like get some of the efficiencies there. So they looked at like eliminating unnecessary meetings, try to get rid of some unnecessary travel, reduce administrative work. We talk about some of the things that we've implemented to try to focus that work so that you're just every day you're just the most productive that you could be. But what? I think it was from an environmental consultancy, Tyler Grange, environmental consultancy in the UK. They said, we put it to our employees ultimately because the incentive was if we could figure out how to get this work done, or at least get most of the work done in a week in 4 days instead of 5, that's a big incentive. And so people were very creative in figuring out like how to basically get the work done. And that's been our experience too, is like, I think our team has tried to figure out, ways to make it work. And so like we've had some challenges, but, I think we put it to the team rather than like try to like imagine it from a leadership perspective. And it usually works out pretty good.
Yeah. And just a couple of context points there. First, the trial that happened in the UK was not just knowledge workers. Right. It was
everybody.
Restaurants,
every kind of thing.
Advertising. I mean, it was a true cross section of industry in the UK. Second, everything that I read indicated that revenue for those companies was either the same or exceeded the revenue for the same period the year before. And so that whole notion of like, well, can we maintain the same productivity, brings up the question of, well, what is the definition of productivity? If the definition of productivity is revenue and profit and, you are driving or exceeding revenue, we don't really have insight into profit. But all of our experience is that it doesn't really have an impact on profit if you do it right. The performance is there. And I don't think anyone went in, to your point, I don't think anyone went into these organizations in the UK and said, this is how you do it. Follow these principles. And so some people probably had a bottom-up approach, like the one you're talking about. Some people probably had more of a top-down approach, like the Shopify example of Shopify, the COO coming in and like releasing a bot that eliminated all recurring meetings. That's very top-down. It's like, hey, no recurring meetings and starts now. Boop. And 2 weeks from now, you can add back some meetings, if you really need them and if they're approved. So there's top-down, bottom-up approaches and all that stuff. But, I also want to say for us, the 3-day weekend was only part of the time that we took off the table. So we took Friday off the table. We did not turn our billable expectation up. It's basically we didn't take 5 days of billable expectation and put it into 4 days. Like a lot of people and this is one of the wrong ways to do things, is they take a 5-day work week and they lop off Fridays and they make 4 10-hour work days, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So we didn't do that from a billable hours expectation either. So we adjusted our billable hours expectation based on a 4-day work week or a 3-day weekend. But we also put in huge chunks of quiet time. And, especially during the pandemic, that quiet time was meant to be uninterrupted time for rest, for work, or for getting shit done around the house. You could not communicate with another person inside the organization. You couldn't, set meetings. It was really flow time for whatever you need. And this was back when you needed, to manage grocery deliveries and, clean the house and help with homeschool and, stuff like that. So we took a lot of time. So that's eventually it was like 2 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
So we took that off the table as well. So now you're looking at, 8 hours plus another 8 hours from the 2 hours a day of quiet time. So we took 16 hours off the table. And we were still able to perform exceptionally well. In fact, that period from, 2020 to the end of 2021 was the best performance we'd ever had in our agency. And so it can be done, but, here are a few of the things that are really important to think of as, kind of high level principles. Number one is you have to eliminate wasted time, and organizations waste so much time. So what would you, what can you think of as an example of some of the things that we did to basically eliminate non-value added time to make room for increased productivity in a shorter burst?
Yeah, we have, I've done a couple things. So one is we really push back hard on doing recurring meetings with clients. That's probably the number one time suck, is when you got a big invite group. You might not be talking about, I've sat in a lot of meetings previously where I might not talk at all other than saying hi to people. So, we try to get away from that and try to have sort of a more agile way of sort of scheduling those recurring meetings. That's still pretty much the case. So I'm not on a ton of just recurring meetings. We also have a lot of, we have dedicated time in the morning to plan work so that, whenever I'm off to start my day, I know what I'm doing. That's a big piece. And so you kind of know when's going to be time for collaboration, when's going to be time, we've got time for flow work and those sorts of things across the board there. So there's a number of things that we've done from that perspective. One thing that I think that we've seen really happen and to take place is really seeing people, asking folks to just say, like, what can we do? Sort of that negative pressure of having all these blocks of time that you can't schedule meetings. Then, we end up with meetings that are naturally like the most important meetings to have, because otherwise, if it's like, we could do this asynchronously, or we could have a smaller group of people to do shorter meetings or whatever, you end up, not spending every moment outside of those, 2 hours a day of quiet time, not in meetings, because, we've sort of prioritized where we're going to be spending our effort there. So I think a bottom-up approach is good, because also people know where the waste is inside the organization too. So if you ask people, what are the meetings that you don't need to be going to anymore? Well, I got 5. I don't need to be at all these meetings. So take myself off the invite, add me back in for the one meeting I need to come to a month, and let's start there. So I think the Shopify example was sort of a top-down mandate, but they also let it filter back up from the ground up. So that's another good way that we've seen organizations be really successful with this approach. But you're right. You have to think really intentionally about really, I think one of the great things that the 4-day week does, or the 3-day weekend, as we put it, does is it really just puts a lot of emphasis on getting the most out of those 4 days. You're not just spending a bunch of time. Again, it's sort of that natural negative pressure on an organization to just sort of figure out what's going to drive the business, what's not. Let's cut those meetings out. Let's cut that work out. And so that's sort of been our approach. And I think, that sort of process is where I think it helps people really rethink about, okay, what's going to drive revenue for organization? How can we produce more with less? Those sorts of things. Yeah,
that's right. You really have to focus on squeezing out the non-value added time.
Yeah,
not creating space for more value added time, but squeezing out the non-value added time, because inevitably that's how we end up, reversing decisions like the 3-day weekend. It's because, we don't have enough time to collaborate. We don't have enough time to, do this, that, or the other. And the, kind of knee jerk reaction is, well, let's go back to the way things were before.
That's right.
And in the reality, you have to be thinking, no, there's probably still some waste to squeeze out of our business. And a couple of, business philosophers that I would recommend on this topic are Taichi Ono and Shideo Shingo, who are the architects of the Toyota production system. And they identified 7 kinds of waste in the manufacturing process. I don't know why I held up 5 fingers. 7 kinds of waste. There you go.
It's easier.
5, 6, 7, yeah. They identified 7 kinds of waste, which the Japanese word for waste in this context is muda, M-U-D-A. And one of them is, the waste of waiting. Another is the waste of transportation, moving things from, point A to point B. In a knowledge worker context, that's the, moving work from person A to person B with a lot of delay in between and waiting, et cetera. So there's all kinds of, waste and non-value added moments and stuff that's going on in companies that if you got rid of all that, you could probably do a 3-day work week, frankly. But, another thing that was really important, and by the way, we're now experiencing this 3-day weekend in a radically different context than the pandemic.
That's right.
And some of the things we're unwinding a little bit. And I think that's important too, is that you have to kind of continue to innovate it and tie it to the zeitgeist. It was much more important in 2020 and 2021 to have blocks of quiet time where people could flow at home or flow at work or whatever. That's right. Now we can use some of that time for collaboration and start to pull collaboration back into the mix. So you kind of have to continue to reevaluate it. But we really went hard against management waste because management waste can be a significant, and when I say management waste, and, forgive the what sounds like Marxist terminology here. It's really not. It's really grounded in agile and lean and, a bunch of concepts like that. But there's a theory about, the role of management and the value-added components of management and the non-value-added components. And there are value-added components and non-value-added components. And the non-value-added components are a burden on the worker and a tax. A burden on the manager and a tax on the work and the worker. And so we actually eliminated all management. What happens when you eliminate all management is that managers no longer have to meet. Managers no longer take people away from work to talk to them about stuff. It creates a lot of space. The other thing that happens is that all the good shit that managers do, you lose.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we're bouncing back right now to find the right water level for management and leadership in our organization because there is a level of coordination, of providing for the needs of individuals, for working on things that would be considered meta work. A lot of that meta work's incredibly productive. But I think for us, it was good to go all the way there so that we could build back up. Because if you just ask, managers, hey, what's the valuable stuff that you do that is management stuff? I think that list would be a lot bigger than reality. If you ask me, hey, what's the valuable stuff that a CEO does? I'd be like, oh, shit.
Well, here's the list.
A company couldn't run without a CEO, and it's incredibly important. The reality is I have one recurring meeting a week. It's 90 minutes. Yeah. It's with a senior leadership team. And most of the time beyond that, I'm not doing, a bunch of management stuff or a bunch of CEOing stuff. I'm doing stuff like this. I'm, working on client accounts. I'm, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is a balance between what the perception of, necessary management is and what the reality is. But you got to find that balance for yourself. But just know that chances are, if you are considering going to a 4-day work week, and you need to find the time to make it happen, that there's probably a lot of management waste. There's meeting waste. There's probably also a lot of management waste that you could look at.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the really positive things that I think came out of this study, I think a lot of things did, but I think once you sort of figure out that you can do this and be successful about it, is it shows that, like, whenever you do have troubles, it's not because people are working 4 days a week. It's because something else is happening in the business, right? So I think it's, like you said, it's easy to go back to say, like, well, let's just go back to 5 days and, we'll be better. And a lot of times it's looking past sort of some other core areas in the business where there's challenges. And so I think that's the good thing about sort of proving to yourself and seeing proof out there in the world that 4 day week can work, because I think it's really tempting and kind of lazy just to, like, say, well, let's go back to 5 days. Well, let's go back to 6 days. Let's go back. I think there's lots of things where you could say, like, well, let's just push people harder. Let's let's forget about the things that sort of made us want to do this in the first place. And so I think that's a big thing. The other thing too, I'll say, is that I think it kind of speaks to the management tax, but I think a lot of folks look at this as like, hey, I think, a 4 day work week also fixes, like, it's kind of a silver bullet for our employee experience. It'll improve our employee experience. It's just not, right? I mean, like, it's definitely a component of sort of the experience of working at the Starr Conspiracy, but it's not the thing.
No, we've had some of the highest and lowest employee net promoter scores during the era of the 3 day weekend. It is not a silver bullet.
Yeah, exactly.
But, that being said, let's talk about the experience a little bit, like what it actually feels like, because look, you can do this. You can run a profitable and, a successful business. And it does create an experience that most people don't want to give up. It's like once you experience it and you see the impact that it has on your life and, the way that you can integrate. Like if you are a 5 day worker, there are all these social institutions out there that you just don't integrate with. I mean, I'm talking about like school. I'm talking about like, it becomes very difficult to see this whole non-weekend life,
That's right.
And so you get all this role strain. It's like, I'm a CEO. Okay. That's my, business role. I am a father, I am,
That's right.
I'm a member of the community, et cetera, et cetera. But if I can only execute my parent duties and my community duties on the weekend, all I ever see is that weekend slice. I don't get to see the day to day or engage in the day to day of, of seeing what's going on at school, of providing more at home, of, just, 4 hours cleaning on a Friday, like changes the whole orbit of everyone around my house.
That's
in
right.
a really good way.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see that. And so, my experience has been that it's so beneficial that it's worth fighting for. And I see it from both directions. I'm not like this dude who's like sitting at home working on a Friday and a Saturday, hating on the fact that we have a 3 day weekend. I also benefit from it in a tremendous way, and I don't ever want to go back to any other way. And I will break every convention of business to make this work.
That's right. Yeah, it's great. I mean, and I think it goes back to sort of when we talk about sort of the experience dimensions. When we look at employee success and work experience, I mean, it really impacts both those in really significant ways. Work experience on the work experience side, just how work gets done changes completely, and it really prioritizes, and it really, like having your schedule more compact and also trying to just not work 10 hours, 12 hours a day to make it work really makes you think about, like, and especially when we're working from home. I've worked from home for, now more than a decade. So, I've got more experience, but still there's distractions at home. There's definitely distractions during the pandemic, but there's still distractions at home that, it could be easy to pull your weight. And all of a sudden you're like halfway through the afternoon. You're like, man, I didn't get shit done this time. So, it really sort of like put some good positive pressure on you to like sort of like prioritize and think about when you're going to get stuff done. It changes the systems that you use to do that. So like efficiency, collaboration, all those sorts of systems that you're like, you're using in-house really have to be oriented around this idea of like, where can we sort of get the maximum value for the least amount of time? Really try to get those non-value added times out of our processes. And then for the employee experience side, I mean, for the employee success side, it is. I mean, like you mentioned cleaning, and I always just laugh about that because it's something that like our family, like whenever I don't do that because I'm working on something else, like people notice. My whole family's like, well, the laundry is not done.
Yeah.
The kitchen's not like super clean right now. Like, what happened? I'm like, I didn't work on it. Like, what the hell? Now we're gonna have to work on this on Saturday. I'm like, this is what we used to do.
I know
every week.
And then it's like conflict time. It's conflict time on Saturday. It's like, you go clean your room, and
we got to go because we have a bunch of stuff to do too.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot less frantic, and I think it's also been good. I think what I've heard from some of my colleagues, and I've experienced this myself, is just also because a lot of times, at least most of the year my kid's not here. Most of the year my wife's not here on Friday, and so like I get to spend some time in my own head. I get to spend some time with my own like interests, playing computer games, playing music, like that sort of stuff, like where I prioritized, spending time with my family. If you got a choice and you got the extra time, I think it just leads for a more enriching life. So people have taken on photography, art. Somebody was telling me they were like taking pottery classes. I mean, like this is stuff
Nancy,
that you can
Nancy
do.
took a silversmithing class.
Yeah, I mean, like it's great. And she's like, and like Nancy was one because she's like, I don't get an opportunity to work with my hands because we're a digital agency. We do work, usually with things that you can see on a screen. So like it was great. It was a great opportunity for her to like do something that sort of expands her vocabulary of what it means to be an artist, especially someone as talented as she is. So I mean, like that sort of stuff is like really important to. I think when we think about employee success, we think about it within the bounds of work a lot of times. And I think what the 4-day week and sort of what the 3-day weekend sort of says is like it's really outside the bounds that sort of when I come in Monday, I'm refreshed. I know the week is going to be packed full of stuff. And then when it's Thursday, I'm going to stop. And, that's what most weeks look like. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah. Well, just a quick commercial, and not intentionally, but we can help with this. The Starr Conspiracy can help with this. We're an experience agency. We work in customer experience, employee experience, and shareholder experience. On the employee experience side, that's a primary domain of experience. We break it down to 5 subdomains: employer brand, recruitment, marketing, candidate experience, work experience, and employee success. This actually falls under work experience. It's a part of day structure. It's a part about it's a part of how work is organized and how people collaborate to get work done around the time that we share together. And it is not an easy thing. And people who have not experienced it before or seen it in context or, done the research. I mean, we've been researching work systems like Agile and Lean and, all of these different, intersection points between philosophies like Agile and how that actually works inside systems and workflows and all that for over a decade. And so this is something that we can help with, but more importantly, and to kind of leave it here for today, I believe in the 4-day work week for a lot of reasons. And it's not some, kooky, like new age, as we used to call things back in the day. It's not some kooky new age, management philosophy. It's a real way to, drive a successful organization that allows people to bring their full selves to work. I remember, as you were kind of talking about, the before times, and in the before times, often about halfway through Thursday, I was already dreading, the Friday. I mean, it just like it was a slog to get to the end of the week. And it's been 2.5 years now and I don't have that feeling anymore. It's like the 4 days go by fast.
They go by fast.
And it's just a real balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a real magic to like the 4 days of work, 3-day weekend thing where you never really kind of get in that, rut of like, oh, am I going to make it 5 days? So I believe in it. Because I think a lot of that time in a 5-day work week, in the context of our business was wasted time anyway. And if you compound all the waste of, the management waste and the meeting waste and, the movement waste and the efficient workflows and, all that stuff, it wasn't just that Friday often ended up being a waste because of burnout, but there was so much waste along the way that, it just kind of contributed to this overall kind of gross feeling of, kind of being in like a sausage factory or something. No offense to anyone who's in a sausage factory. But if I was in a sausage factory, I'd probably like to work there 4 days instead of 5. But that's a different context. We can talk about that later. But inevitably, you're going to have people who listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, fucking another 4-day work. That would never work. It would never work for me. It's stupid. It's lazy. It's all those, things that, people read those articles, no matter what their favorite news source is. Everyone's covering this right now. Everyone's been covering this experiment. There was a big, article on NPR, BBC had an article, Fox News covered it, CNN covered it. I mean, everyone's covering it. And so this is out there, that there are liberals, conservatives, people of all stripes who are saying this is bullshit. This would never work for the company.
Just work 5 days. Be happy you get a job.
Exactly. Well, don't even start on that. And so, like, what would you say to people who just kind of have that, like, never 4-day mentality?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're going to convince them necessarily. So, I mean, a lot of these folks are the same folks that are like, just get back to the office. You don't need to work remote or hybrid. Just get back to the office. So, but what I'd say is like, I think really think about, the fundamentals of what we talked about. So it's not just because I think what gets the headline is 4-day week. People only working 4 days instead of 5. Like, think about what else you're also getting from this, and like what sort of process changes and business changes you're making to accommodate that are actually really positive for the organization too. And so, I think that's probably, I can't say just like think harder about this, but like think about like, a lot of these companies spend a lot of time thinking about like, how can we optimize our business? And even if they decide, the 4 days just doesn't work for us for whatever reasons, and there's probably some legitimate reasons out there, they're going to come out of it with a better business because they've made a bunch of optimizations to try to make the 4-day work week work. And they probably also realize some things about their employees and what their needs are. So I don't think I don't think an experiment is bad. I don't think, if you have to go back on it, it's a tough conversation to go back to it. But like, some of the companies did end up like going back to a 5-day week, but I think they learned a ton of things about what sort of made their business go and what sort of things they could give up. And what sort of flexibility they could offer their employees. Yeah, that may not be a 4-day week, but it's something different that offers them that flexibility. So that's, if I'm a business leader, I'm kind of skeptical about that. I'd say also look at it as an opportunity to transform sort of the way you're thinking about your business, because I think you're right. I think we kind of came out of a really disruptive period. It's easy to just sort of like go back into the same rut. Yeah. But employee expectations are different. Business expectations are different. It's a weird time out there in the market. Yeah. So it's also a good time, I think, to look critically at the type of business you want to build. Yeah. So I'll go in the opposite direction. I think that's great advice, but I'm going to disagree with you. Stay closed-minded about it. Just go ahead and stay closed-minded about it. Really. Well, that's the CEO. Yeah. Just, because here's the deal. Your employees are not closed-minded about it. No. Right? Yeah, and so, hey, find your radical, candidates, your radical employees. If you want to work in a before times company where, everyone has this, very command and control, desire for structured management systems and 5-day work weeks and, heavy on the performance management, low on the employee success, there will be your people out there, right? Yeah, for sure. And so you can create the kind of company that you want. You can create the set of expectations that you want. Just know that the market is shifting under your feet and that some people prefer, a different approach to employee experience, which includes,
considering things like a 4-day work week, and that those people are going to go somewhere else, because once they start hearing from other people about what their experience is, it truly is, Lance, you said this, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
And once they hear from enough people how life-changing it is, and they're kind of predisposed to that anyway, they're going to go somewhere else and get it, because there's a long-term labor shortage. The genie is not going back in the bottle about a lot of shit. And one of those things is that, this whole notion that like employee power and employer power, it's, first of all, I hate that dynamic and people talking about it in that dynamic, but this whole notion that it's cyclical, and that employers are going to get their power back, and they're going to be able to force everyone back. And look at fucking Amazon, who their S team, the leadership team, announced, that everyone's going to have to work back in the office for 3 days a week. And within one day, there were 13,000 people on a Slack channel begging them to reconsider their decision. Petitions were flying around. One day, 13,000 people. Yeah. And so for those organizations who want to go back to the way things were, just realize that there's migration in another direction, and you're going to end up with a company that you want one way or another. So keep a closed mind about it. I strongly encourage.
I like that. I think one of the things that I think one of my takeaways too is like, even organizations that, I think we've had good success with profitability, productivity with 4-day week. Even for those organizations that can't get 100% of outcomes that they could before, can't get the level of profitability, not having to chase that compensation. Compensation's been going up for, the last couple of years pretty significantly. You're going to get those 15% of people that have experienced or have heard about, that. I'm not saying to use that to your advantage. No. I think like, you don't have to, I think we've experienced this whenever we've hired. It's like we tell people this is like, yeah, I'm in. Like I get it, and it makes recruiting easier. It makes retention a lot easier. It makes it, I think from a compensation and from a structure perspective, it makes it very hard to consider any other place unless they also have a 4-day week. So I
totally agree with you. Part of that. So look, all cards on the table. I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that 2022, especially the second half, was a much more difficult year for the Starr Conspiracy than what we experienced from a performance perspective in 2020 and 2021, right? But second half of 2022, when the tech sector, catches a cold, we get influenza. I don't know if you can, talk about that anymore because of COVID and everything. But, right. That old, kind of adage. And so when the tech sector, faltered, we were deeply impacted. We roll into 2023. Cost of living has gone up a lot. We're not going to be able to do cost of living adjustments, and, merit increases in the first half of the year. We've established kind of an expectation around, but people aren't freaking out about it because it goes back to something that you said, earlier. No amount of money would cause me to go back to a 5-day work week. That's right. You have to be careful with it because, if you're looking for efficiencies, you could probably cut people's pay. Because you're going to a 4-day work week, I do not recommend that. No,
it's a terrible idea.
It's awful, but you do get a little bit more consideration during difficult times where,
patience
in our shape, in our specific situation, we're not going to be able to do a COLA. In another organization, if they were in that same position, they might see, 5% of their people leave. I don't think, we haven't seen that, and I don't think we're going to see that. So it buys you a little more time to get through difficult times together.
That's right.
So, but it also creates opportunities to go to the dark side that you have to be, careful about.
It's a big time balancing act for sure.
Yeah, because it is so valuable, and people love it so much that you could do a bunch of evil shit.
Yeah, but a lot of those organizations that are going through that right now too are also asking their people to come back to work. They're coming back to awful offices and really, really poor employee experiences. So I think again, it's one of those things where you can't just push the 4-day work week button and be like, oh, that was easy. Like it fixed everything for us. It's part of a holistic strategy. And like I said, we've definitely helped. We definitely help people navigate through that challenge themselves. But that's the first thing we're going to tell you is like, okay, we'll help you with this, but this is not just you do the 4-day work week and everything works. We've had challenges just like a lot of other folks that have done 4-day work weeks have had, not related to having a 4-day week though.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that's the key point.
Well, I'll end on a controversial prognostication. Look, we're not a huge agency. We're not a small agency. We're a mid-size agency, right?
Yep.
So I can anticipate, the kind of opinions out there of like, oh, that stuff would, never happen. And it couldn't work in a large company. It couldn't work in, my company, et cetera, et cetera. Well, here's the deal. The future is small. And this notion that, so there's a lot, this is probably a whole nother podcast, but we are in the middle of a new organizing principle. Society is changing, and we're seeing unprecedented decentralization in every aspect of society. And one of the outcomes of that is going to be a move towards more decentralized autonomous organizations, not in the weird crypto way, but in the way where we organize around the work instead of organizing around the role, right? And people are going to become much more comfortable working with mid-size service providers, mid-size manufacturers, mid-size companies, because of a lot of the lack of velocity that comes along with working with a very large company and a lot of the waste associated with it. So first of all, this will work for a large company. But second, it doesn't fucking matter because, the next 50 years are going to be the era of the small and mid-sized company. So there
you go.
I'm Brett Starr. He's Lance Hahn. In the words of Mr. Beast, smash that subscribe button. Give us some likes, some love, some comments. Come on, visit the starconspiracy.com. That's 2 R's in Starr. Have you ever tried to give your email to somebody over the phone? It's like LANCE at the THESTARR. That's 2 R's CON.
Yes.
And they're like the Starr Conspiracy. And it's like, I only get half my email because no one can get our email.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fine.
I didn't want that email anyway.
Yeah, no kidding. I do want to spend some time talking about Vivint and DirecTV at some point, but that's another conversation. All right, everyone out there, have a wonderful day. Your workout is over, and we'll talk to you soon.